One of the biggest lies that we have been telling in Western media is that Japan does not have feminism. I think it's really funny when people say that feminism doesn't exist in Japan because you are seeing it. I am obviously a feminist myself, so I support Japanese feminists.
Nobody cares. I swear these activists are the most annoying people on the planet. They constantly throw out the dumbest takes while pretending to be intelligent.
But you also kind of advocate a lot for feminism here in Japan.
I think a lot of feminists in Japan are trying to advocate for people to feel free to do what they want. And not only that, but to also not feel the pressure to become like a housewife or something like that, which you can do if you want to. But I think that you should have that choice and be able to say, okay, do I want to do this or do I want to have my career or do both?
Yes, that is the same person from the first video. She was using a face filter, which is, never mind. Anyway, her great solution to helping a country that's already in an extreme birthing crisis is to take a population that's known for working so many hours that they can't develop a social life and encourage more of them to enter the workforce. Well, then how do you fix the population crisis? Oh, right. We'll just fix that problem by destroying Japan's culture with mass third world immigration.
You stress the importance of like feminism having been around in Japan for much longer than we have. Is this something you regularly face in your comments as well? That, oh, you're a foreigner coming to Japan, you're bringing Western ideals here. It's not your place to speak about this.
Definitely. And I think people love to say like, oh, you're a white woman. I'm like, yeah, but I'm talking about stuff. I've researched this. And it's all Japanese literature that I've looked at whenever I talk about these things.
No, you haven't. Which books? You certainly didn't read them in Japanese because I've looked at your content and there is no way that you know enough Japanese to read college-level material. She says in the podcast that she only really studied Japanese for a year, which is nowhere near enough time to get literate enough to read difficult books. She doesn't speak Japanese in any of her videos, which is a red flag. And the subtitles that she writes in videos like this on her YouTube channel are so awkward that they were almost certainly written by AI. So it looks like she uses AI for more than just face filters.
But I'm hoping that the more I talk about these things, the more that people will start to bring awareness. And I'm really hoping that we'll start to see more Japanese people and foreigners alike come together and think, okay, well, clearly this is not the exact image of Japan I had. And that's a good thing because it means that we can see what we have to change.
This is what I find to be most annoying. This girl is from England. She has been living in Japan for like 5 minutes. She doesn't speak the language, and she's like, yeah, we have to change everything about this country. The story of America is, shut up. This is the most annoying type of person, and as for me, as someone who has studied Japanese for years, if there are any political thoughts in my mind about Japan, it's not about how I can change all the things about their society that I don't like, but it is instead about how I can export the good things about Japan, like their very low crime rates. Which brings us to modern-day Twitter, where Elon Musk just made it so that posts by Japanese people auto-translate into English, and posts by English people auto-translate into Japanese. And after about 20 minutes of this, it started a cultural revolution that resulted in this flag here. Japanese people found out how much Americans like them, and Americans found out how much cultural appreciation of America that there is in Japan. So basically the sentiment of this moment in history was both countries saying, wait, you guys love steak, hate mass immigration, and have annoying, violent leftists in your country too? It's a little depressing learning that Japan has these screaming idiots too, but also seeing on Twitter that we both have the same trauma has been like cultural group therapy between the Japanese and Americans.
Japanese Twitter and American Twitter and English Twitter, we're kind of all bonding over being incredibly racist and hating illegal immigrants and migrants in general.
So there was a very positive shaking of hands between the Japanese and Americans, but the part that I think is more relevant to this video is that this change to how Twitter works revealed that a lot of political tactics that are being used to degrade America are also being used to degrade Japan. And ever since Nick Shirley exposed that Somalian immigrants in Minnesota were scamming taxpayers out of, what was it, hundreds of millions of dollars, we've also started asking where else these scams are being run, because if you think it's only happening in Minnesota, you're an idiot. Now, we've been told that we need these people in America due to labor shortages, but considering, all of the theft, and considering research like this that indicates that people from these cultures marked in yellow, orange, and red are a net negative on society, or at best, provide little to no economic value, I think that excuse is bullshit. But look where else the labor shortage excuse is being used.
The number of foreigners working in Japan hits an all-time high.
It's quite a cool thing to see. Much needed, given the decline in population. The LDP, the ruling government over the last sort of decade, has been kind of sneakily bring in more and more people. They've done a pretty good job bringing in sort of 250,000 foreigners a year to fill the gap of workers, because there just aren't enough young people in Japan to fill all the jobs, the vacancies that are popping up.
Okay, so you have a few less 7-Elevens in Japan until the birth rates go back up. It's not a major sacrifice, just watch in the next corner and you'll find another one. Supposedly these work visas are for stuff like taking care of the elderly, but if you just walk around Tokyo for like 20 minutes, you can see that many of the newcomers are not working those types of jobs. Now, one especially nosy American foreigner might say, hey, why not do some investigation to see if you can create an effective plan of action to get Japanese people to have more kids, instead of importing tons of people from China on work visas who very often report that they hate Japanese people. If the ruling party in Japan has to sneak immigrants into the country, then that's probably because it's a policy that Japanese citizens don't like. But doesn't this sound so similar to America, where you have numerous different groups of third worlders who reside in our country, who wave the flags of their country of origin as they say America is a horrible place? Which brings us to this incredibly interesting video here from Japan of some sort of protest or demonstration with signs in English about racism, and if you slow it down, you can see that it's full of liberal women who clearly aren't Japanese.
According to their fashion and no shame dancing middle of the street, they're probably the Westerners, and then they're holding this. So it's a I stand against racism. This is basically Japanese communist propaganda. I need to explain this. This is just a kind of group of people who call racist everyone. Everyone who against immigrations, everyone who against mass immigrations, everyone talk about foreigners, they call you racist. So they're kind of like super toxic in Japanese society, in my opinion. And I really think it's rude. They moved to Japan because I think they don't love where they're from, and they love Japan, and they moved to Japan, right? Why do they think Japan should change for them?
Again, as an American, I feel seen, I feel heard, because we have annoying white liberal communists in our country too, and we hate them.
I just think it's hilarious because who the fuck are you to tell somebody else that they can't live here? Because you were born here? Obviously you never learned how to check your privilege, and other people just want to come here and live a prosperous life. Who the fuck are you to tell somebody else, I'm better than you? I deserve a nice life, you don't. Who the fuck are you to say that?
Well, since you asked, I'm an American citizen, and as an American citizen, I will say that it's not the moral obligation of Americans to allow newcomers to live here. If they want nice lives, then they can fight to fix their own countries. In fact, we don't have to let any immigrants live here. As for Japan, they don't have to let any of these communist immigrants live in their country either. They can just kick them out. Why would they take any of this shit from people who aren't even Japanese?
Japan is not a communist country. We don't want communism in Japan, okay? This Red Rose group, anyone who against them, you are racist. And just remember, they were professional of making the racism out of nowhere.
Anyone who knows anything about communism doesn't want it in their country. So, much like in America, a lot of Japanese people have been pretty vocal about how they don't want tons of newcomers to flood into their country, and the newcomers aren't exactly peaceful about that. Which brings us to Yusuke Kawai, who's sort of a famous right-wing troll in Japan. If you want to have an American equivalent, maybe Alex Stein going to council meetings and doing stuff like this would be a good comparison.
AOC, my favorite big booty Latina. I love you, AOC. You're my favorite. Look at that booty on AOC. That's my favorite big booty Latina.
Want to do a little selfie?
I love it. My favorite AOC. Nice to meet you, AOC.
Again, Yusuke is sort of a Japanese version of that. And so recently, he was just north of Tokyo in Saitama, protesting a Kurdish festival because there's been a lot of friction between Japanese people and Muslims in recent years. And gee, I can't imagine why. Could it be because Muslims routinely try to force their values and Sharia law on the people of the countries they immigrate to? Or could it be the culture of violence that Muslim immigrants are known for? Oh, so I see the Japanese have known about this stuff for a while. Anyway, so at this Kurdish festival, someone punched Yusuke. Obviously, I can't show the actual hit because of YouTube, but it's pretty easy to find on Twitter. Now, I'll be honest, Yusuke reacted to the hit a little dramatically, kind of like he was auditioning to play professional basketball. But the overall point here is that there shouldn't have been a person to strike him in the first place. And when it comes to America, we really should be pushing for extreme penalties for political violence instead of the usual catch and release policy that we have now. If we stop tolerating it, it won't happen. Notice how people only block roads in California and New York instead of places like Texas or Florida where you're allowed to run them over. But because these radicals know they can get away with being forceful and being violent, they will keep getting in your face and keep doing it. Yes, you heard that correctly. I'm sure this has nothing to do with woke Western liberals, but the term hate speech is a part of the Japanese vocabulary, and this guy appears to want someone to be criminally punished for saying Japanese people first, which is what is written on his sash. This is another incident with Yusuke Kawai, and I don't get why this guy is screaming in his face. I don't even see what the problem is with saying Japanese people first. Favoring your native population should really be the policy of every government. It's not a country's obligation to act as a charity for other countries. It's the job of immigrants to show that they are of value to the people who are already there, or they don't get to come. Otherwise, you just get a bunch of flunkies shopping around for whatever country gives them the most benefits.
Do babies born in Japan get citizenship? The simple answer is no. It depends on the parent's nationality. But honestly, I've seen people ask, then what's the point of giving birth in Japan? It's more about the environment. Japan is safe, well-structured, clean, and that's the kind of environment that shapes a child mindset and future. What matters most to me is raising my child in a place that gives them discipline, exposure, and loads of opportunities.
Another cultural export that America should take from Japan: birthright citizenship to children born to non-citizens should be abolished. Outside of that, I don't see how watching a video like this wouldn't make someone who is a native of that country extremely mad. Countries are a team, and the last thing a country needs is a horde of societal leeches who, instead of talking about what value they're going to bring to the group, they talk about how it's a much better place to socialize their child than their home country, or about all the benefits they get. This person is not loyal to Japan, just like the people who do that in America aren't loyal to America. They're just here for the free shit.
I think that if this is part of the Conservative rebrand to attract the young, it's deeply, deeply embarrassing. People don't want...
Why is it embarrassing to sing the national anthem?
And I think inviting people who are coming to your country not because they think it's a great place, but instead because they want to receive welfare, is an extremely dangerous thing. As I said, based on this Netherlands study, people from these countries are generally net negative contributors to society. They either cost the country money or provide little to no economic benefit, and in exchange, you get a bunch of people who don't speak your language and are loyal to other nations. Technically, this is assault. This is political violence. If it happened in America and it was my decision, this chick would be on a plane back to China. Zero tolerance for political violence. I am so tired of this shit, and it will only stop when these people are brutally punished for it. If you don't think it's that bad, then imagine if a man did this to a woman. Now, there is some missing context here. I'm not sure what the lady said that was so offensive that she deserved to be grabbed, but everything she said afterward was incredibly based. Basically, she's saying that it's not a smart idea to flood Chinese people into Japan and allow them to naturalize, because if you do that, they will start outvoting Japanese people and destroy the culture. Gee, isn't that yet again an incredibly similar problem to what we see going on in America, as we have like 10 different racial groups who are not assimilating and creating their own insular communities and outvoting the native population in certain areas. Right now, Texas is basically being invaded by India. This state is unrecognizable from the state that I moved into several years ago, as it is very easy to walk outside and be in an environment where 80 to 90% of the people aren't speaking English. I feel like a foreigner in my own country. And by the way, tons of them have committed fraud to move here. Now, outside of birthright citizenship, I'm not sure what the laws are around this stuff in Japan, but as for America, the fact that we let foreigners do stuff like hold political office is insane. You should not be able to hold any office if you were foreign-born, because that's what's been allowing them to one by one create insular and non-assimilated communities and take over entire cities and counties. This has been destroying American values and culture. Only people who are born in America to American citizens should be able to hold office. Now, I'm all for exploring other cultures. I love seeing the ideas of other people and how other countries operate. But when it comes to political influence from foreigners, we should be far more protective of American values.
今日本語喋れなくても帰化ができるし、5年ですよ。5年住んで日本語喋れなくても帰化できるんですよ、日本のシステムだと。 それは緩すぎるんですよ。帰化を厳しくしろ。
I believe that's the same woman from before who was attacked by the Chinese lady, saying that it only takes 5 years to become a Japanese citizen, just like in America, and you don't even have to be able to speak Japanese that well. Though I think Japan is changing this law to 10 years, and America should follow in their footsteps so that it's much harder for political cheaters to just import voters. But this lady brings up interesting points that I want to talk about here, which is why we need to be careful about who we allow into the country, and we should probably make it harder for foreigners to influence our politics. I don't think becoming a citizen should be impossible for newcomers, but it should be harder, because in addition to all the other stuff I've said, unless they have immigrated from a country that speaks the same language, an extremely uncomfortable number of immigrants have a very low proficiency in the national language of the countries that they immigrate to, which makes them super easy to manipulate. And what I found is that this is not just because of certain cultures immigrating, it's actually a function of any unchecked immigration. Now, I'm not saying that the culture doesn't matter. The culture of the immigrant absolutely matters. However, immigrants in general tend to engage in offending behavior unless standards are set.
According to a survey to foreign workers, about 70% can't speak Japanese well. Among them, 30% hardly speak it, and about 50% only manage a basic conversation.
So I would love to think that these stats exclude people who are in groups that I belong to. However, it is quite common for Americans and other Westerners to immigrate to Japan, reside there for many years, and speak either very little or no Japanese. And to talk more about that, allow me to direct your attention to a YouTuber podcast that's filmed in Japan called Trash Taste.
Welcome to another episode of Trash Taste. I'm joined once again by the boys, and we have a returning guest because you're back in Japan now.
Yeah, I did show that clip for a specific reason. I was a fan of this podcast until they spent multiple episodes glazing a famous pro-communist terrorist animal abuser named Hassan Piker. That's a lot of qualifications. Anyway, as I said, Trash Taste is a podcast in Japan featuring 3 hosts named Joey, Connor, and Garnt who talk about anime, food, Japanese culture, and tell cute little personal stories about what it's like to live in Japan.
I went to a public onsen in Niseko. Niseko is a very famous ski resort in Hokkaido. It's also famous for being a Japanese ski resort with 0 Japanese people in it. Mm-hmm. It is so goddamn expensive that no Japanese people are there.
It's basically Australia.
I was at a bar in Niseko after skiing, and I was lining up, and there was this Japanese guy, and he was super talkative and genki. And I was joking. I was like, "Hey, you're like the only Japanese guy I've seen here." And he's like, "Oh, yes." like he realized he like in real time that his friends had all been priced out or something. Like, I don't know. Like
it's the first time he realized he's a minority in his own country.
It was crazy. There's like not a single Japanese person.
Yeah.
Huh. Japanese people are getting priced out of their own local spots because of over-tourism. Gee, I wonder whose fault that is. And for the people who are going to actually me because the tourists aren't all Westerners, note that these guys also have their tourism content translated into other languages. Now, as it relates to this video's topic, the reason that I want to talk about this podcast is because 2/3 of it, Connor and Garnt, have been living in Japan, well, we're getting closer and closer to 7 years every day, and they speak almost no Japanese, which really makes them some of the biggest tourists in Japan. Not only that, but this podcast relates to a bigger foreigner in Japan YouTuber group filled with numerous people who also speak little to no Japanese, like Abroad in Japan and Premiere 2, who have both lived in Japan for over a decade and are not fluent. And they aren't even close to fluency either. By fluency, I mean that you can have a non-routine, spontaneous conversation with an adult native speaker without having the native speaker significantly dumb down their language so that you can understand them. None of the people in question in this video are anywhere near that good at Japanese. The only exception to the rule here is Joey, who is a native speaker, so if you're wondering why I'm not talking about him in the video, that's why. That being said, I've been studying Japanese for a number of years now, and I've really started improving a lot since I began taking it seriously about 1.5 years ago. So at this point, I would like to be as transparent as possible with how good I am at the language, because recently, as I've gotten much better, I've come to find out that a lot of people on YouTube lie about their foreign language abilities.
Having spent, 13 years in Japan, it's important, I think, to protect Japan's cultural identity to some degree. And people have to, if they're going to permanently live and build a life in Japan, it makes sense that they should be able to communicate in the language. Not necessarily to a native degree. I wouldn't be able to say I could speak or communicate in Japanese to a native level, but I'd say I'm like fluent conversationally.
Yeah.
Can read and write and whatnot.
Bro, I've seen numerous examples of your very limited Japanese. I've had native speakers review it, and there is no way in hell that you are anywhere near conversationally fluent in the way that most people envision. He's not literate either, and he's spoken numerous times about not studying, this being one of the examples.
It is the most incredible thing, learning Japanese. Probably my favorite thing about living in Japan, full stop, is studying the language.
Him saying that studying Japanese is one of his favorite things is probably the most egregious lie that he's told his fan base about his language proficiency. Anyway, that was friend of Trash Taste Chris Broad, who owns the biggest foreigner in Japan YouTube channel called Abroad in Japan. You might recognize him as the guy from earlier who was promoting third world immigration. I think his skill at Japanese is B1 on the European scale based on the clips that I've seen. He's probably around 2 years of study away from the kind of fluency that he pretends to have. For those of you who don't know, the European language scale is one of the most commonly accepted ways of mapping people's language proficiency. If you look at the scale on screen, I would say that my language ability in Japanese is B2, which is what I would consider to be basic fluency. This means I can talk about any topic I desire, but I might lack specific words that would make my life easier. So if I wanted to talk about politics, I might say person on the left or person on the right, instead of liberal or conservative. Politics is difficult because there are like 7 different ways to describe the left and the right. Now, based on the prior definition that I gave, I do not consider myself to be genuinely fluent in Japanese. I think most regular people would say that when they think of someone being fluent in a language, the description for C1 is what they have in mind, with an emphasis on being able to express yourself easily or fluently in spontaneous conversation. A spontaneous conversation is like a general conversation about a random topic like video games or politics or some school subject. A routine conversation would be like ordering food, casual greetings, or a self-introduction. And for language learners, I caution you because a lot of people on the internet will trick viewers into thinking that they are fluent by showing routine conversations that are very easy to learn within a couple of weeks. That's how polyglot scams work.
My name is Language Simp, and I am a hyper-polyglot alpha male gigachad. Today, I'm going to be reading from a script in a bunch of languages that I don't know anything about, in order to try to make a lot of money off of YouTube ad revenue. I just memorized these phrases from Google Translate this morning, but I'm sure that dumb Americans are gonna eat this shit up like Big Macs from McDonald's.
Outside of that, Japanese is a very standardized and popular language, so I've mapped out what I need to go from B2 to real fluency, which is C1, and I can get there in maybe 6 months or so. I'm not saying that to gloat, I'm saying that to point out that any of the complicated translations for Japanese in this video were checked over or done by a native speaker or someone who has achieved mastery in the language. It would be nice if some of the people that I'm talking about in this video who film interviews and ask questions that are way above their skill level in Japanese were more transparent about that. But now that we've gotten all the expository information out of the way, allow me to just re-emphasize that it's not only illegal immigration that's the problem. We should also be paying attention to the behavior of legal immigrants who are long-term residents as well, especially when they don't offer the most fundamental courtesy as a person who is an outsider, which is learning the primary language of the country that they move to. We'll start with the most embarrassing example, which comes from Garnt, who also goes by Giguk on YouTube. Now, to preface this part, I was wasting time on Twitter debating Trash Taste fans, saying that none of them speak Japanese except for Joey, and this was a video recommendation given by one of their fans, who assured me that Garnt speaks Japanese. You've got to be kidding me. Why am I studying so much if all I have to do is be able to say, Yoroshiku onegaishimasu, and everyone will think I'm fluent? That's lesson 1 of Japanese. I could have just stopped there. If you don't know what Yoroshiku onegaishimasu means, it's kind of difficult to translate without paragraphs of information, but basically it's something that you say to be polite. Hajimemashite means nice to meet you. That one's easy. So this is a video about Garnt producing an anime, and he has a translator carrying the weight for him the entire time.
How would you pronounce house in Thai?
Ban.
Note that there are multiple moments in this documentary where Garnt speaks Thai, so if he actually spoke Japanese, then he would almost certainly be showing that off. Now, initially, this part was going to be much longer to fully prove my point, but after I saw this video, I cut all of it because the video makes it apparent that Garnt has barely studied Japanese. I would have trouble saying that he's achieved A1 on the European scale, which is beginner level. I mean, is it even anime if the creator doesn't speak Japanese? Though, as a former fan of Trash Taste, this really shocked me. I was actually also pretty shocked about how low Chris Broad's Japanese level was as a former fan. I was a fan of Abroad in Japan until he altered a video of a friend of mine to make it look like she was laughing at homeless people, which is defamation. But the reason the whole language thing shocked me is because I've watched them talk about learning Japanese and studying numerous times on the podcast, so I thought they were staying current and trying their best to become really good at the language, but it turns out they hadn't really studied at all.
You're going to Japanese school, aren't you?
I am going to study now.
I go once a week for like 1 hour. No, 2 hours.
It's my speaking skills. I don't have as much experience actually outputting. That's the big challenge for me. Here's the problem, guys. I am an introvert when I speak English. Now, imagine being an introvert and not really speaking so much, except you have to practice a language you're not so familiar in. Bro, that's trying to learn a new language and trying output is so hard naturally.
How do you have bad speaking skills when you live in Japan? Go outside. I mean, you're rich. Just pay for italki. He's totally lying here. He's not antisocial. He doesn't talk to Japanese people because he's a beginner and he can't speak the language. Based on this documentary, Garnt literally only knows words that you hear in anime.
For those of you who don't know what a weeaboo is, they try to learn Japanese through the anime they watch and usually end up pronouncing it wrong and looking like a complete idiot.
I'm glad to see that after, holy shit, 11 years, that nothing has changed. But these guys don't have kids. How are they so busy? I also work ridiculous hours and I still find time to study. I mean, shit, this guy learned Japanese, Garnt. You can hear him speaking it in your documentary. Going back to the stats from Nobita's video, this is not only common, it's actually the norm for Western foreigners to immigrate to Japan long term and either speak no Japanese or very little Japanese. Just for reference, Connor and Garnt moved to Japan in November of 2019, so they've been living there for 6.5 years. Both of them are beginners and can barely speak an entire sentence. For clarity, 6.5 years is more than enough time to get fluent without even that strict of a study plan. Premier 2 has been living in Japan for like 14 years, I think, which is more than enough time to be almost as good as a native speaker. He's still a beginner who knows maybe 10 words. Chris Broad, or Abroad in Japan, has been living there for 13 years. His Japanese is maybe lower intermediate level. A real key piece of evidence that they aren't even close to fluency is that you can't find videos of them speaking Japanese for extended periods of time. You can't find them doing something like a 20-minute interview where they only speak Japanese. Whereas when people are actually fluent, it's super easy to find them speaking.
本当はカタカナ英語って言いたいところなんですけれども、英語って言い切ってしまうとコメントなんで、これだからアメリカ人は全部が英語だと思いやがってって言われたりするんで、カタカナの言葉外来語です。
That's a Japanese pop singer from America named Nicholas Edwards, who moved to Japan around the same time that Chris Broad did, maybe a year or so before. And if you can't tell, Nick's Japanese is phenomenal. This is probably the best I've ever heard from a non-native speaker. And unlike our experts in all things about Japan, like Chris Broad or the two non-Japanese members of Trash Taste, you can easily find Nick speaking for extended periods of time. You can find him saying complicated things, and unlike Chris Broad and the Trash Taste flunkies, you can find him pronouncing things correctly without an incredibly thick accent. The reason that you can't find these other guys, except Joey, speaking Japanese for a long period of time is because none of them are anywhere near fluent, and the reason for that is because they all live in foreigner bubbles. Now, I've already showed this clip in a different video, but I think it bears repeating to show the difference in lifestyles between someone who cares to learn the language and someone who is pretending to care to get viewership from people who can't tell how bad his Japanese is. So here's the only video in existence where you can find Chris speaking Japanese for more than like 2 seconds, and basically he just tells on himself the entire time. I don't know why he said any of this shit if he wants people thinking he's good.
Cosmo86 suggested speak only in Japanese, so for the entire day. Can you do it, Chris?
Dekimasu! No problem, I can do it, but I do need a few coffees. I find in the morning, which is now I'm crap at Japanese, it just doesn't come out my head, so I haven't actually spoken Japanese in a long time.
It's good practice.
I really don't speak it as much as I should, because a lot of my friends speak English rather well.
That's the thing. They always want to practice English, so you feel bad speaking Japanese with them.
It's going to be pretty tough, I think.
You haven't spoken in a while? You live in Japan. Go outside. If you're conversationally fluent, I'm not saying that you have to speak every day, but how do you live in Japan and go like a week without speaking Japanese? Also, Chris surrounding himself with only people who speak English is a key indicator that he doesn't give a shit about learning the language. It says that Chris has no interest in Japanese people at all, as someone who has chosen to live in their country. And if you don't understand how bad this is, then listen to the lifestyle of someone who is actually good at the language.
I speak English, not even 1% of the time. I don't work
with anybody who speaks English natively. Japanese people don't want to speak English with me because I speak Japanese.
Right, you're in Japan and you've been there for a while, so why would you almost exclusively be speaking English? No one found it weird when Chris said that? How does your Japanese get rusty when you live in Japan? As for Nick, who is actually good, note that he said that Japanese people don't want to speak English to him. Personally, I've noticed that if Japanese people are trying to speak English to you, it's because they think you're bad at Japanese. It's their country and they want to speak their language. And if you don't see how offensive everything these long-term tourists are saying is, then listen to this.
If you're spending 10 years in Japan and you're working in Japan and your friends are Japanese, you don't want to spend your whole life having people knowing that people are holding back because they're worried that you might not understand, or you might not get a joke, or you might not get this, or you might not get this reference or that reference. That's not the best feeling. I live in Japan and I know that my life is here, so I want to make sure that I'm not having to like miss out on anything, I guess, just because I started at a completely different place than everybody around me.
I think that listening to Nick speak about his experience in Japan and then comparing that to the trash taste friend group just makes them look like complete assholes. Nothing has pushed me more to learn Japanese than going to the country and wanting to speak with the people who are there. So when you go 6 to 14 years and you can barely speak, it says to me that you don't care about the native population of the country that you're a resident in. All right, we haven't even gone over Connor from Trash Taste. Connor is the master of overstating how good he is at Japanese. And I want to get into this for one because it gives everyone an idea of the mindset of the people who immigrate to a country and refuse to learn the language. Now, if you're a tourist or a short-term resident, I don't care if you don't speak the language, just respect the natives and don't break the law. But when it comes to long-term residents, especially when it comes to America, because that's where I live, I really want to use this to display how eager tons of immigrants are to take the benefits of a country as they stay in their own insular foreigner communities and make little to no effort to assimilate into the culture they're benefiting from. I'm doing this in the hopes that Americans will start getting a little bit more upset when people reside in our country for over a decade with zero language proficiency in English, because things like that are bad for the US. Second, I'm kind of tired of so many influencers lying about their language abilities, and Chris Broad and Trash Taste lie to their fans so frequently about their skill level at Japanese, either directly or by omission, that basically all of their fans think they're pros. And don't gaslight me on this, I've wasted an embarrassing amount of time arguing with their fans on Twitter. Let's just say it was research so I can cope. But during one of these conversations, a fan of Trash Taste who said I was a clown kindly provided me numerous links and assured me that Connor definitely speaks Japanese. I gotta say, I've never seen a more incriminating set of videos that makes Connor look bad. Now, I'm going to note that the upcoming clips are from different time periods, but I really don't see much of a difference in Connor's Japanese between the older clips from right when he moved and the ones that are more recent. So I'm showing this moment first to say that this is the best clip of him that I watched. Let's see how good Connor has gotten during his time in Japan.
はい、マーケティングとワイトショップでクッキーリトップお願いします。以上です。追加でお願いします。
Are you YouTuber?
Yeah, I'm YouTuber. Yeah, yeah.
日本のことを発信してますか？
そう。日本4年住んでいます。
4年？
そう、4年。
Wow, Nihongo Jozu, so he can order food and say how long he's been living in Japan. This is literally one of the first few lessons in Japanese. You can teach someone how to have this entire dialogue in 1 week. These are all extremely routine conversation points that he goes through every day. Notice how the cashier immediately switches to English when something out of the customer cashier routine is asked. And also notice as the conversation switches back to Japanese and she asks him what he's streaming, instead of elaborating on the question, he says yes and then moves the conversation back to a routine dialogue tree that he can easily understand by saying that he's been living in Japan for 4 years. This is how I can tell he's a beginner, because when you start speaking, you can't say what you want to say, so he has to continue the conversation by saying what he can say. What I mean by that is that it sounds unnatural if the cashier says, "Are you streaming stuff about Japan?" And Connor says, "Yeah, I've been living in Japan for 4 years." That sounds weird. A more natural thing to say would be something like, "Yeah, I'm showing my friend around Tokyo." But his Japanese isn't good enough to move away from the standard self-introduction dialogue tree, which indicates that his language ability is not very good. Nothing about this conversation is really spontaneous. Go to Japan for like a week and you'll have this type of conversation like 50 times. Anyway, now that I've shown his best clip, let's travel back in time 3 years to Connor after he'd been in Japan for a year, so we can hear him talk out of his ass about how good he is.
How good is Connor's Japanese on a scale of 1 to 10? That depends what you consider 10. Is 10 fluent? And 1 is 0? And I guess 5 is conversational? I guess I would put myself at a 3, maybe. Like, not quite good enough to hold conversations, but good enough to get my point across.
Connor, you are nowhere near that good. I'm guessing he's overconfident because he's done well with a couple of memorized dialogue trees, but try having a conversation that's more than 2 minutes and I'm sure he would fail. I would love to see if he could even complete a 30-minute italki trial lesson without switching to English. Again, keep in mind that this video was done multiple years before the cookie livestream with the cashier, and if we're judging his skill based on that video, and conversational is a 5 out of 10, then he's a 1, because all he can do is routines.
Let's do it. Let's do Duolingo. Here we go. Write this in Japanese. It's a good start. I like that. Yo. Oh, it's wrong.
Imagine you go on this big diatribe about how good you are at speaking Japanese, and not only do you misspell the word for good morning, which is one of the first words that you learn, but also it's spelled in Japanese for you right below the answer box.
A map? What is map?
Another beginner word that Connor messes up despite him telling his audience that he essentially is more than halfway to conversational fluency. The characters for map are something that you learn when you study 2nd grade kanji, so it's definitely a very standard word that you would learn very early on. That being said, let's return to this clip.
You're going to Japanese school, aren't you?
I am going to start
I go once a week for like 1 hour. No, 2 hours.
This is basically no effort. You might as well just not study at all. That's why he sucks in all these clips. You'll never get fluent in Japanese with 1 lesson a week. This is what I'm talking about when I say that so many of these people want the benefits of living in a foreign country without doing any of the work. You need at least 1 hour of study per day to get fluent in Japanese because it's a hard language for English speakers. For something easier like a Spanish speaker learning English, you probably can get away with 30 minutes a day of active study, and the rest is going outside and interacting with the natives. Anyway, let's fast forward a few years.
But the worst part about speaking somewhat Japanese, I'll say, the first parts of the conversation, I sound like I know my shit. I sound like I know everything.
Connor, they can instantly tell that you're not that good because you mispronounce words constantly, just like Chris does.
You'll go to a restaurant in Japan, right? You'll sit down and there's always the questions they ask you. You sit down in the restaurant and then she starts talking like super fast, the waiter or he starts talking super fast in your ear, right? I'm taken off guard, so I'm not listening. So now I'm like losing, right? And then she'll just be like, and then she'll just say a word like, arugi, and then cut, right? So it's like, I don't even know what you said. You could have been talking for 30 seconds and all I heard is the word allergy, and then you ended it in a question.
It sounds dumb, but allergy in Japanese is pronounced arerugi.
Arerugi.
Connor is definitely nowhere near being able to watch anime without subtitles. And note that when I bring this stuff up, I'm not expecting them to have a perfect Japanese accent. That's very difficult to do. What I am saying, though, is that after years of living in Japan, they don't even have a good understanding of the basic phonetics of the language. And I mean, also they make beginner mistakes all the time that are very noticeable if you speak the language at just an intermediate level. So imagine what Chris, Connor, and Garnt sound like to natives.
You know when I did the IRL stream at Maylene's house, on the way over there, the taxi driver spoke to me the entire time. And the first 10 minutes of the conversation were pretty chill. I understood like everything he was asking me. He was just asking me about what I do for work, what kind of foods I like, why am I in Japan? He's telling me about his life and stuff. And then he started asking me stuff about my hobbies. And I started trying to explain some things to him that was really hard for me to explain because my talking isn't as good as my listening. And then he started telling me about his life. And I just started finding it so hard to keep track of what he was saying because he was talking for so long. I was trying to change the conversation to get to easier stuff so that I didn't have a harder time following.
Connor, if you're listening, there is no way that you were that good at Japanese at the time of this video. When I first watched it, I nearly lost my shit laughing when he started off with, yeah, so I don't understand 90% of what's being said to me at restaurants, and then moved on to, yeah, so I had a pretty good conversation in Japanese with my taxi driver. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Anyone who has actually taken Japanese seriously can tell that these guys are terrible at it. Really how fluent someone is can be measured by what degree they're able to have spontaneous conversations, and Connor starts the video off by admitting that he can't even understand the restaurant script that he has likely heard 200 times by that point. Just to be clear, there are 2 parts of this conversation. The part where Connor says that things were easy, and that's because he was answering basic self-introduction questions. This is the part that he says that he handles well, and then the instant non-routine questions are asked. He admits that his Japanese level is terrible. So it looks like he's being honest here, he's not trying to mislead people, and he's giving a genuine assessment of his speaking ability. And what I'm saying is that I don't even believe that he made it through the easy 10 minutes of self-introduction without vast misunderstandings, speaking broken Japanese, or switching to English. I have yet to see Connor make it more than a few sentences without speaking English, so there's no way that he made it 10 minutes. And Chris Broad does this sort of thing as well to look like he's being honest, where he'll say, well, I wouldn't say I could communicate in Japanese on the level of a native, but I'm pretty good. So it looks like he's being humble here and saying that he's bad at Japanese. But remember that Chris understands stuff like media literacy, and he knows his audience will think he's fluent in Japanese if he just says like one sentence, which is why he never says more than that, because then people who actually know Japanese would be able to assess his ability and tell everyone that he's bad. So he's trying to look humble in this moment, but what his audience actually hears is, yeah, my Japanese is great. I'm almost as good as a native speaker. Meanwhile, he can't even read children's books. Both Connor and Garnt do this same misrepresentation as well. Respect to Premier 2, though, at least he doesn't pretend he's good. Speaking of Connor, at the time of this video, he had been living in Japan for 3 years. If he had studied just 1 hour a day, he would likely be close to fluency if he combined that with talking to natives in his local environment. This is not that hard. You can study on the train or draw kanji on your phone for a few minutes while you're at the bar. Stream 1 less hour a day. It's not like you need the money. Just like Garnt, you're rich. I mean, you guys host a podcast about Japanese culture while you live in Japan. Is it that much to ask that you spend a little time studying? I know that some of these clips are old, but like I said, Connor isn't any better in the new ones. He's been living in Japan for over 6 years, and his Japanese ability is maybe A2, which is pretty easily achievable in about 6 months of studying. Let me be clear though, I know that Connor talks down about his ability in Japanese a lot, but even in his down talking, he is still saying he is vastly better than he actually is. I genuinely think he would struggle to hold like a 5-minute conversation in full Japanese. Literally every clip I've seen of him, Japanese people are constantly trying to switch to English, or he is switching to English.
Like, that was actually the most frustrating, is that I had to knock out... Oh, I have a Mito Tech.
Mito Tech?
I'm okay. That's an American joke.
Oh, Andy Warhol?
I know.
You know Andy Warhol?
Yes.
This is a Uniqlo.
Doraemon?
Doraemon.
好きですか?
好きです。
Ah, see.
みんな日本人ドラえもん好きね。
Who's this guy?
Giant.
Oh, his name's Giant? His name's like Giant?
He's actually giant.
Okay.
Actually giant.
So, does every Japanese person know Doraemon?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yeah, everyone knows Doraemon.
Yes.
Everyone knows Doraemon.
100%.
Yes.
Your English is good.
Yeah, you're very
Your
good.
English is good.
You tricked us.
Yeah.
You're very good.
裏切り者ね。
Hey, can I make an order?
Yes.
I think he wants to try
coffee beer.
the coffee beer.
Coffee beer 一つ。
I'm still working on my yuzu beer.
Yuzu beer.
No. I'm still. まだまだ。すいません。
ありがとう。
Sorry.
It's okay. It's 文化。
今配信します。
Connor yet again makes a very basic mistake at the end. In Japanese, he said, we will stream now instead of we are streaming now. You can actually tell his grammar level based on this conversation because the more Japanese way of saying this is, 今生配信中です, which means we're in the middle of a stream right now. The 2 part is on the JLPT N3 list, and the JLPT N3 list is the intermediate grammar. So I don't think he's gotten there because that's one of the easiest and most commonly used grammar on that list. But the real key detail that Connor is still a complete beginner at Japanese, 5 years into his stay there, is that the easy way of saying this is to use the present progressive tense, which in English is the ing form. So stream is the present tense, streaming is the present progressive tense, which in Japanese would sound like 今配信してます or we are streaming now. This is beginner grammar, and yet again, one of the first things that you learn. Trust me, even though it sounds like I'm getting really into the weeds here, I'm not doing justice at all when it comes to how many mistakes Connor makes that indicate that he is a beginner who has not really put any serious work into studying. We're only going over the basics here. I don't want to bore you guys with 8 hours of explanations going over every example I have, but it's suffice to say that I wouldn't be calling out multiple channels with millions of followers each if I wasn't very sure that their Japanese proficiency is not only super low for the amount of time that they have been living in Japan, but also they are all blatantly misrepresenting how good they are. To put it simply, Connor's skill at Japanese reminds me of that Family Guy scene with the Mexican guy.
Me llamo es Brian.
That was pretty good. But actually, when you said me llamo es Brian, you don't need the ace. Just me llamo Brian.
Oh, you speak English?
No, just that first speech and this one explaining it.
You're kidding, right?
¿Qué?
This is what I mean. The second you go out of some routine that he's memorized, he can't speak. If that's happening to you 5 or 6 years into your stay, it's because you aren't studying. Actually, I'll give one more example so that people who don't understand Japanese can see how laughable it is when you hear stuff like this.
I'd say I'm like fluent conversationally.
So when you hear them talk about how good they are, understand that to Japanese people, all of them sound a lot like this.
Now, I am living in my father's company residence with my family. But we have to leave it soon for his business reasons.
It's actually more pathetic than that because there are far fewer basic sounds for English speakers to memorize when they're trying to learn Japanese versus the other way around. And remember, quite a number of these examples that I used were given to me by Trash Taste fans trying to prove that people such as Connor are definitely good at Japanese. Meanwhile, in that clip with Connor and Premiere 2, neither of them can speak more than a few words without switching to English, and the waitress also is constantly switching to English whenever she can. She's probably doing that because she thinks they're tourists. Like I said earlier, Japanese people don't do that when you're good.
I love speaking English now because I never get an opportunity to. And I think that in the position that I'm in right now, if the other person doesn't speak English natively, then Japanese people don't want to speak English with me because I speak Japanese.
By the way, just for comparison, this guy Nicholas Edwards became conversationally fluent in Japanese enough to work with a Japanese talent agency with just a little bit of time of living in Japan and 4 years of study outside of the country. It's not out of the question to expect these guys to be vastly better at Japanese than they are. They shouldn't be beginners after 6 years, especially considering that their brand is, hey, we're the guys who know about Japan. And like I said, this is not a special case scenario. It's probably the norm for immigrants.
I would say like 50% really don't speak Japanese like at all. Like, I mean, obviously everybody speaks, you know, a couple sentences or whatever, like maybe very basic daily conversation. But in terms of like, oh yeah, you can speak Japanese, I don't know, man, less than 50%. When I first got here, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is just the norm. Like, everybody comes here and they just completely assimilate and they learn the language so well and they become fluent in the language. Wow. I remember having this incredible respect for all the foreigners who live here because I just assumed, like, I assume that's what you do. You move here and you integrate into the culture and you become fluent in the language, and that's that. I didn't realize how much of a bubble these people were living in, and also how much these people want to suck their own and not just tell me, yeah, dude, I'm not fluent in Japanese, like, at all. I'm not even close. It just sounds like I'm good because you don't know anything.
Absolutely. James released this as I was finishing recording Connor's section of this video. What a crazy YouTube refresh pool, considering that James is actually good at Japanese, so his opinion matters. I wonder if we're talking about some of the same people. For clarity, I don't know James outside of watching some of his videos and because of that viral event with the engineer, so we haven't talked about this personally, which is why I'm so glad that he is saying this same shit I am, because now I know I'm not crazy for pointing this stuff out on Twitter. And it also suggests that what I'm saying is obvious to people who actually try.
Every single time I get on the train, I get on transportation, I pull out my Anki cards and I study.
Right? This is how you can tell he knows what he's talking about, because during every bit of downtime, he's pulling out his phone and studying.
It's about respect and it's about your duty to the country that's allowing you to live here. So, you know, forget if it's hard or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You have to learn Japanese if you're living in Japan.
I think you guys get the point. As for the Trash Taste crew, I'll link all the video examples I have of everyone speaking in the description so that people who speak Japanese can make their own judgments. And just for more clarity, this whole conversation would be very different if you could see these guys actually improving at Japanese over time. For example, if someone comes to America and their English isn't that great, but you can see their English consistently improving, I'm not going to criticize or make fun of that. But if I can look at a video of you from 3 years ago and then look at something more recent, and I'm wondering if you actually got worse at the language, that's where I have a problem. Now, getting back to the immigration part, I'm bringing all this up because people really misunderstand the importance of language proficiency when it comes to political and cultural issues. How can you say you understand someone's culture when you don't speak the language? And how do people like this have the audacity to start telling Japanese natives what to do when they have to say it in English? Going back to abroad in Japan, I've already showed this clip in a prior video, but it was so fucking ridiculous for Chris to say it when he's not fluent in Japanese that I'm going to show it again.
People write off my opinions because I'm not born in Japan, I'm not Japanese. And at what point do I become a local? What point does my opinion matter something?
Yeah,
I saw people react being like, I think it's important we've got the locals' opinions on this. I am inherently a local, and I lived in Meguro for 3 years or so, but at what point do you become a local?
Really, the answer is never.
You can never move beyond being a foreigner.
Chris, you don't really speak Japanese. You don't have a Japanese spouse. You don't have Japanese kids. You aren't a citizen. You don't have anywhere near the investment in the country of an actual Japanese native. So why should people give you the respect and the status of someone who has all those things? If Chris called himself a local in America and didn't learn English after 13 years, I would just laugh and tell him to get the hell out of my country. I don't care if Chris says he's lived in Japan for a while. He hasn't paid his dues, not even on a basic level. And what I mean by that is that if you can't speak Japanese, then let me say it this way. Garnt can barely speak at all. Connor's conversational ability in Japanese is maybe at the level of a 4-year-old, and Chris is at the level of maybe a 7-year-old. If you start having adult-level conversations with these people, they won't understand shit, and I'm not just making this up. Chris confirms that he can't have conversations with adult native speakers in this video here.
He's like, Chris-san, how many years have you lived in Japan? And I was like, shit, I can't lie to Ken Watanabe. Oh, but then if I say 10 years, maybe he'll assume I'm very good, and all of our interview will be in Japanese.
Oh no, how terrible would it be to speak to a Japanese person in Japanese while you're in Japan? You can't have that going on in like any of your videos.
Fast forward to the next evening, and we've just wrapped our first day of shooting. It's gone pretty well. And for the most part, Ken and I speak in English, but when he's answering heavy-hitting interview questions, he does gravitate towards Japanese, so he can express himself fully. But we're sitting at a restaurant and having a dinner with all the movers and shakers of Kesennuma town, and one of the main people I got speaking to was the owner of the local sake brewery, a really nice guy called Sugawara-san. But Sugawara-san spoke good English, and he came over, and after a minute or so, he was inevitably like, "Oh, so, Chris-san, how many years have you been living here in Japan?" But before I could deliver my answer, from the other side of the room, I heard the deep, booming, terrifying voice of Ken Watanabe say, 10年間住んでました。大丈夫. 10 years. He's lived here 10 years. It's okay. You can speak Japanese. And I look over and he gives me a knowing look. A look that I'd seen in The Last Samurai when he chopped off that guy's head.
This guy's like, but when am I local? Come on, bro. I'm inherently a local. Meanwhile, 3 years ago, he tells a story about how local Japanese people were pissed off that he had been living there for 10 years and could not carry a conversation with other adults without speaking English. Also, if you think his Japanese is any better than it was 3 years ago, just because he said he was going to start studying again that one time, then allow me to point out that he's made numerous videos saying that he's going to lose weight, and he hasn't lost the weight.
I think the moral is, don't give up learning Japanese like I did. Honestly, that might be one of the few regrets I've had in all my time living here. I should have carried on, even if it was in some small way. I should have carried on my studies.
Now, it's hard to know what the actual story is, but if I were to guess, Mr. I Love Studying...
Probably my favorite thing about living in Japan, full stop, is studying the language.
Based on this video, we know that Mr. I Love Studying hasn't studied in like 9 or 10 years, which is basically since he first moved, and really is something that people who are good don't do.
Always wanting to improve is probably the most important factor in improving.
Right. If your intent is to live in a foreign country long-term or permanently, then you should be continuously improving your skills. At the very least, if you're a foreigner and you aren't C1, you should be studying almost daily. Keep in mind that none of the foreign-born Japanese residents that I'm criticizing are literate in Japanese, so they can't read. Now, to again put things in perspective, remember all those people who are making fun of Kai Cenat and saying that he can't read?
How do I pronounce that?
Spontaneity.
Spontaneity. The condition of being spontaneous. Spontaneity. Hardly such questions set up a false what does that mean?
It's funny because watching this is exactly what it looks like to learn how to read in Japanese. But the point is that Kai simply having the opportunity to struggle with words like spontaneity and false dichotomy means that his reading ability in English is years ahead of the Japanese reading ability of every person that I've criticized in this video. Kai is only looking up difficult words. Connor probably has to look up every word when he reads. So when I say this is all a metaphor, understand that when people come to America and refuse to learn English, this is what it's like. And no one is calling Ken Watanabe a racist for being upset about Chris's Japanese level. Anyway, the reason all this matters is because you heard them say it, Chris and Connor both think they're locals. They've lived in Japan for a significant portion of their adult lives, so they believe that their opinion should be taken seriously. Do you not see the similarities with some of the foreigners who are leeching off America? So actually, I don't think this is just a feature of third world immigration. This is a feature of all immigration. All immigration that comes without conditions. First, they import the liberal white women to start calling everyone racist, and then eventually Japanese natives start calling other Japanese natives racist for saying that Japanese people should be first, and then the third world hordes come, which is why those of us in the West need to up our standards, one of them being fluency in the language to get long-term residency. And just to finish off this section about language proficiency, here's why that's important when it comes to things like politics and society. Do you think the average foreigner can understand that the Patriot Act had nothing to do with patriotism? It's a law that allows illegal spying, and they trick people with that name. Politicians do shit like this all the time. The fact that you can get voting rights in America after 5 years of residency is a real travesty. 5 years of English study is not enough time to understand all the language tricks that politicians regularly use. It should be 10 years. Really, we should be making it as difficult as possible to survive in this country if you don't speak our language. America is not a charity. Let me be clear. I do not care about your sob story. I don't care about your hopes and dreams. Either provide value, learn English, and respect American culture, or get out. When it comes to people who aren't getting with the program, I really have very little sympathy because ultimately, if people want to do things, they will.
If you want to speak a language, you will. If you just wish you spoke a language, then you're not going to speak a language.
Right. If you want to do it, you'll put in the effort and you'll figure it out. And what I'm getting at here is that if someone has been living in your country for 10 plus years and they barely know the language, they basically haven't studied at all. Unlike the Trash Taste social group, the people who have actually been integrating into Japanese society for over a decade don't have a problem speaking Japanese. They have a problem speaking English.
また盛り上がって全力でやりたい気持ちもあるから、とりあえず様子見て流れで行こうかなと思う。The English part is actually the hardest one for me. Not spoken this long in English in a long time. It is, I am struggling to find the right words and not like shout out something in Japanese that makes sense to me.
That was Chris Hart. Coincidentally, he's another American-born Japanese pop singer who's also incredibly good at the language. 12 ways Japan changed us? Well, clearly it didn't change you into someone who can speak good Japanese.
Well, I think we need to challenge ourselves. I'm going to do a video with Natsuki soon called I Tried Speaking Japanese for a whole day. We should do something like that. Wacky weekend entirely in Japanese.
Let's do it.
Just...
And then we could laugh at each other.
Just sitting in silence.
Sure. We should
occasionally just go, Sugoi.
I'm down.
Difficult.
I'm down to do a full day in Japanese.
That would be quite interesting.
Right, so now someone suddenly wants to prove he can speak Japanese. Looks like he's been reading my tweets. I like how Chris's challenge is to live in Japan outside of a foreigner bubble for a single day. I mean, you don't do that normally. Why would this be difficult? But yeah, that'll be great. I'm sure it'll be heavily edited, and their conversations primarily will be ordering food and other topics that don't require high language proficiency. Now, just to address this, because I'm constantly asked questions about learning Japanese in the comments, so for those of you who want to learn something that takes a decent amount of time, understand that there are a few things that are required for you to succeed. Also, I'll try to say this in a way that applies to skills in general, so people who aren't learning Japanese can take this information outside of language learning. First, you need to be the type of person who is willing to jump in and just tackle the workload. It's going to be a lot, just deal with it. Once you've jumped in, the next thing to do is develop a plan and upgrade your plan as you go along your journey and get better information. One of the ways I can tell that Connor and Garnt are beginners is because they don't really have a strong game plan for how they're going to improve. They just say, I'm going to study, I'll go to a class or something, without really understanding what that means. Speaking of honorable mentions and another example of what I'm talking about, here's another YouTuber expat in Japan who is friendly with the Trash Taste social circle named Emi Richu, who is certainly a beginner at Japanese.
Because you've been in Japan now if I've been here for like 5 years now.
I've been here for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
How has it been?
It's been good.
Are you missing the US?
No.
Emily? No?
Especially not now.
Are you still studying?
I've plateaued. But I want to get back into it. One of my New Year's resolutions was to up my Nihongo.
Because you had like a weekly like lesson thing, right? Yeah.
We had private lessons.
So what was it like getting like private lessons? I'm kind of curious.
It helped the most at the beginning, but then it kind of slowly turned into you're just reviewing the same kanji each week.
Maybe if you actually studied, you wouldn't have to keep reviewing the same kanji every week. If you're plateauing, it's because you aren't doing the homework. Emi Richu had been living in Japan for very close to 4 years at the time of that podcast, which is enough time to get pretty good without an egregious amount of studying. But I love how all these people just tell on themselves because they aren't good enough at Japanese to know that they're telling on themselves. Lessons once a week will never make you fluent in a language, especially if you have no practice of self-study. Language is mostly self-studying, so if you suck at that, you're definitely a beginner. Someone who doesn't have that practice locked in at 4 years is someone who is not really trying. Anyway, so the first thing that you need to do is just get started. Second is to develop a game plan and develop a stronger game plan as time goes on. And don't worry, because I've done a lot of that for you. On screen is a list of materials that you can use to get pretty good. Part 3 is important for every skill, and if you understand this, it will significantly increase how fast you can learn things. There are 2 types of learning that are important for a language. Well, technically 3, but you can't really do the third one until you've been studying for a while. These 2 types are active learning and comprehensible input. Active learning is like studying flashcards, drawing kanji, or learning grammar. Honestly, it's the crappy, boring part of learning. It's where you call upon the wisdom of your ancestors and blatantly memorize everything about the skill that was already discovered by other people. Comprehensible input is when you take that wisdom and apply it to things that you see or hear in your environment. The better you are at the language, the more fun this part is. Now, this idea of comprehensible input doesn't plug perfectly into every skill, but what it means in terms of languages is that you try to listen to and read things that are at your skill level. So if you're a beginner, then you're going to be reading children's books and watching comprehensible input YouTube videos that are made for beginners, which is basically like watching Blue's Clues until you get better at Japanese and can do things that are more fun. So it might not directly translate to other skills, however, the concept itself does translate overall, and what it means is that if you want to progress at something quickly, then ideally, you try to keep the challenges that you impose upon yourself at or around your skill level. Outside of that, keep your active learning under an hour per day, and comprehensible input can be as short as 15 minutes or it can be as long as like 8 hours. The third type of learning is going to be your output, which for languages, that can be speaking practice, or it could be shitposting on Twitter in Japanese, which is a personal favorite of mine. Speaking of output, I will add one final criticism of this friend group by saying that unless your language level is at least C2, and you're going to live in Japan for maybe 5 or 10 years or permanently, do not waste your time learning pitch accent. Just do the karaoke singing thing that I suggested earlier and listen to the language a lot. That will make you better at pronunciation than like 99% of Japanese learners. Outside of that, Dogen is lying to you when he suggests you can learn pitch accent at home just by taking his course. What it actually takes is an insane amount of rote memorization and constant correction from native speakers. Maybe it's worth it to spend some time learning how to hear some of the patterns because that doesn't take like 10,000 hours, but any more than that is not worth it unless you're going to be on TV or something. Quite honestly, fuck Dogen. I wanted to say that in a video from a few months ago when I talked about Chris's Japanese ability, but I cut it for time. Dogen has helped perpetuate the lie that Chris has a high level of fluency in Japanese by reviewing Chris doing, oh, what a shock, it's a self-introduction around a bunch of non-native speakers and a teacher who is doing lessons for beginners, so it's nothing that will actually test his Japanese level. Why I hate Japanese TV? Well, that's easy. It's because your language ability isn't good enough to understand it. And let me be clear, this is malevolent. In this language review video, Dogen throws Joey up on screen first, who is a native speaker, shows a non-routine conversation that would genuinely be difficult for a Japanese learner to do. Most people don't get to this level. Dogen then says that Joey is really good, and moves on to Chris and says Chris is also good. So for anyone who knows nothing about languages, which is almost Chris's entire audience, they're going to think that Chris is around the level that Joey is. You know, he's not a native speaker, but he's probably pretty close, right? He's almost as good as Joey. I mean, Joey said he passed the JLPT M1 test, and Chris said that he was planning to take that same test, so basically they're around the same level. Meanwhile, Chris can't even read children's books or speak more than like a minute of Japanese without switching to English. Chris and Joey are nowhere near the same level. I'm tired of all the misrepresentations. Anyway, fuck Dogen. I just wanted to add him in as another honorable mention and say that I've talked to multiple native speakers about his pitch accent ability, and they can all still tell that he's not a native speaker. So what's the point of putting all that time in? Ultimately, learning a language takes a while. Nobody becomes an expert in 6 months, so it's best to focus on little victories in your improvement than to constantly ask, when am I going to be fluent? Anyway, thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.